Hey all, um, there's an issue with today's world. An issue that is slowly eating at my soul. Slowly eating at my very existence of how disgraceful the USA is. Don't get me wrong, the USA is home of the free. We have a lot of opportunity here and everything like that. As an autistic person, I have extra programs and benefits that are open to me than most people are. You are always taught that you cannot survive not having a job and living on your own without a job. Well, for the last 10 years, I have made that possible because of my diagnosis, because of my disability. That's where I have extra opportunity to be able to survive in certain situations like this. It's what gives me a different mindset. It gives me a different perspective on life. Because not only do I have to fight for my social problems, but I've also had to just deal with prejudice. I had to deal with racism and all this stuff. And I'm sick of it. I mean, yes, there is the whole black movement, and yes, there is the whole white movement. And they're constantly fighting at war, which I look at like it's just stupid. Like the lady, I don't remember her name, that was on the maple syrup bottle for years. She went around, that was her livelihood. And her face is taken off the syrup bottles, claiming racism. And yes, to us, in today's time, that is looked at as racism. Well, not that in particular, but what her as a person stood for, because technically there was images floating around of her chained to a cast iron stove. Yes, to us that is racism in today's time. But we're trying to focus on something that happened in the past. We are literally bringing our country back in time and not moving it forward. People who are yelling about racism in today's time, whether you're white, whether you're black, it doesn't matter. You call racism out on any of the groups, and you're no better than anybody else. You're using past idiocies of society that we overcame. We've been better for. We are basically bringing back old issues that happened in the Civil War or before. That is literally like 90% of our population of today in the U.S. was never born in the Civil War. And we're crying out racism for stuff we weren't even alive for. I mean, come on, people. Are you idiots? Are you just certifiably insane? Don't get me wrong, I see why they call racism. But what they're complaining about, what they are suing people for, what they are doing is bringing back stuff we have already overcame as a country. Stuff that most of the people that are complaining weren't even alive for. I mean, come on, people. How many of you, let me ask you this publicly right now. How many of you right here, right now, whether you're black or white, can honestly say you were alive in the days where blacks were chained to an oven, or whites was shot on site in a black community? How many of you can say that is the world today? Because from where I stand, I don't see no whites being shot in a black neighborhood. From where I stand, I don't see no blacks chained to a stove like in the Civil War days. That was society. That was the way life was back then. It was harsh, it was rude, and it was stupid, and we learned from it. But here we are in an age where everyone has it so much better, blacks included, as well as whites, almost equally, and we're bringing back old issues that we weren't even born for. We weren't even alive in the age of this crap happening. So as an autistic person, I don't understand why people are, and I'm sorry for cussing, and I apologize to my church friends for this. I can't understand why everyone's bitching about the stupid stuff that happened that you weren't even alive for. If you were alive for it, it'd be different. But you weren't alive for it. If you weren't alive for it, you cannot call racism out. No, just hearing about the fact that the maple syrup lady literally got removed off the pancake bottle. The family that is suing the company involving this, which I am all for. By the way, I'm all for that family suing them for that, because that is literally trying to appease the masses for people who weren't even born in that age. That woman went around the country doing tours, doing pancakes, doing syrup. She was the icon of that company. And that company just stripped her of everything she's worth, because people of today are basically complaining about something they weren't even alive for. And that's like most of the racism that is going on, is we're all so focused on what happened in the past. Blacks and whites included. You just simply cannot bring something to light and complain about it and call racism on this crap if you weren't even alive to witness it. You weren't even alive to understand how it felt. You weren't alive to bear witness to the pain and suffering that brought. You had it better than they did. Yes, in our time, that's racist. But it's also not racist at the same time, because you're calling racist on something you weren't even alive to witness. You weren't even alive to bear the brunt force of what that was, to how that felt. You have no right to call racism on that crap. I don't care who you are, whether you're black or white. You just don't. We are essentially turning our country backwards rather than forwards, just by bringing back old issues like this maple syrup thing. I mean, come on. How many idiocies does it take to screw in a light bulb? One. It takes one idiocy to screw in a light bulb. And in that light bulb, it shoots out electricity to the entire room. Well, that light bulb in this case is literally everyone complaining about something that happened in the past that they weren't even alive for, which is a wide array of people, just like a light fills a room. I could get if you were alive for it and you witnessed it personally, because in today's time, that does give you a right to call out racism if it truly is racism. But to bring up something that you weren't even there to witness, you weren't there to live it, and you weren't even born to experience it, you don't have a right to complain. You have it better than your ancestors did. They lived that life so you could have a better one. You have no right to complain about it and bring up old issues and call racism. It's our job to overcome that, to continue what they fought for, not bring it back and to hold the country back. It is our job as their ancestors, white and blacks, it is our job to literally come together in a union format, together as one, and learn from that. Our ancestors fought for that situation, and blacks particularly. Blacks had it the hardest. You know, I like I said, I applaud the family that's suing the company involving the maple syrup lady. I don't agree with the company that did that. That was stupid and unmoral. That was the woman's livelihood in an age where that was life. That was what life was for her. And these people that are complaining racism on that, to get it removed, is literally people who were never born in that age like she was. The people who are born are in their 60s, 70s, if not older. Those are the people who experience that. Anything below that, you have no right to complain. You either weren't old enough to understand, and by the time you were old enough to understand, it was done and over with because they fought for you to have that freedom, or you just simply weren't born until after it was all over with. The way I see it, if we keep continuing to push the racism card on this stuff, like the maple syrup lady of all things, at a time that you weren't even born to witness and be a part of, to really understand how it felt to be in that time, then you clearly don't know what real racism is. Because that's not racism. That is literally a time that there was no other choice but to do that. It sucks for the black community that had to be that way. In my opinion, it didn't need to be that way, and it didn't need to be that way since the moment the USA is signed on the dotted line to become a country. But honestly, the black people of today, their ancestors fought like that in a society during that time to give you guys the freedom. And for whites, my ancestors in this country fought to have to give those rights to those blacks. But we're so busy bickering at each other that we are digressing rather than progressing. That means we are going backwards rather than forwards. For those that don't understand those terminologies, because I know there is several people out there is like, what does digressing mean? What does a progressing mean? Well, that means forward or backwards and forwards. So if I say digressing, it's backwards. Progressing, forward. Remember that. But it doesn't change the facts here. You cannot claim racism if you've never experienced that sort of thing. You can't expect companies to do as you will based on an era that there was no choice except that, because laws just weren't there to prevent it like they are now. You have it better. Quit claiming racism on stuff you weren't even born to experience. Yes, to us, even to me as a white guy, I can promise you, I find what whites did to blacks back then despicable. But that's probably me, not only as a white guy, but as an autistic person that has a very high moral and a very high respect for people. And so, personally, I can't even begin to think why my ancestors, that far back, would have even considered such audacity. But it doesn't give whites or blacks a right to complain in today's time for what our ancestors did. Yes, we can complain. Yes, we can do something about it. What we can do about it the right way is to stop complaining and actually handle it like adults. Stop being children about stuff your ancestors did and start progressing this country to get rid of racism. Because the only way you can do that is realize you were not born in that time. You don't know what it was like. So quit trying to put yourself in a situation you will never get to experience. I don't know of anybody in today's time, blacks or whites, that has ever stooped as low as the Civil War. Our ancestors, the ones who fought for blacks and the blacks who had to endure the pain and suffering, had to do what they had to do to change this country, to give you the rights you have now. That was the gift your ancestors did. You have no right to sit there and claim racism on stuff you have nothing to complain about. You weren't there to experience it. You weren't there to know what it was like. Is it bad? Yes, absolutely. But that doesn't mean it's racism, because back then, that wasn't considered racism. That was just part of life. So you can't call racism on something that was life back then. If something like that happened in today, absolutely that would be called racism. But nothing in our society, either in the U.S. or other countries, have that issue. I mean, we are a progressive world where that sort of criminal acts don't happen. But by bringing back stuff from the past on the basis that it's racist, even though you weren't there to experience it and feel what it was like, is a load of malarkey and just a bunch of whiny babies who are crying to have their way. That's not real racism. That is just a bunch of whiny B-words. I don't care who you are, whether you're black or you're white. If you are complaining about, white privilege, that is an old way of thinking. If you are complaining about black privilege, that is an old way of thinking. I can promise you, not only with the maple syrup lady during that time, I can promise you, I can find about 20 different TV shows and movies that were made during that time before things got better for our country. That proves that whites and blacks were working in the entertainment industry equally. And that was before these laws were put in place that made your lives better before you were even born. So the way I see it, people of today need to take a chill pill. People of today need to shut their dang traps about the whole racism crap and actually do real racism of today, not something that was just life back then. I'm not going to deny it was bad back then. But that doesn't mean it's racist. Because back then, there was no laws made to consider it racist. There was no laws that prevent that sort of thing. That was life back then. There's nothing you can do that can convince me that it's okay to use our past and digress America because you want to be whining about something that you weren't even alive for. That may be the hard truth, but you know what? Racism needs to get over itself. And honestly, it's not just the blacks, it's also the whites. I just today alone, I have seen 6 different articles people have shared with me on 6 different Discords. I have had about 6 different discussions about racism today. It's like today is like a bloody racist day. And and everybody, both black and whites, are trying to convince me to side with each other, and I won't, because both of them are wrong. Both groups are bloody wrong, because you're taking stuff from the past that you weren't even alive for. You cannot base racism on something that there was no laws for to prevent. It's unethical. It's unmoral, and it's stupid and ridiculous. Act like adults, not children. This is why I am just constantly stressed as an autistic person, because for me, I see a balance and equal in things. I see what today is in reality, and I see what the past was. And I can promise you, we have it good in today's life. We, both blacks and whites, we have it good compared to what it was back then. I'm not going to lie. It's not as good as it should, because there is still this racism crap going on. But it is far better. Like, from back then till now, the whole idea of equality has increased significantly by a factor of 150%. More than it was back then in this time frame. The fact that it's increased and made equality better by 150% compared to what it was back then says something. So quit bringing back old issues and calling it racist when there was nothing you could do about it, because you weren't alive during that time. And you didn't know how it felt or what it took to experience it. I feel bad for the lady that had her face across the maple syrup bottle. I feel bad for her, because I know the story behind her. I know everything she had to fight for to be able to have that opportunity to get her face on that maple syrup bottle. I understand the livelihood and the hardships, because there was a whole documentary about her. Okay? I thought it was the most entertaining, most educational documentary imaginable. And what the company has done to her to appease whiny babies that never experienced that life is stupid. It's idiotic, and it's disrespectful to the lady who worked so hard for that company. And it's disrespectful for her family that's suing that company. I hope they win. Honestly. I really do hope they win, because if we can go out of our way to remove an iconic, we're going to use iconic here, an iconic figure that has been a part of society in a time that it was just downright bad. I don't look at that as racism. I look at that as somebody who is willing to fight for what they believe in. Somebody that was willing to make a better life for themselves and their family and the people around them. To me, I don't see racism in that. I see equality and a fight to be treated as an equal in a world where that equality didn't exist, where it does now. That's how I see it. I don't see it as racism. I see it as a fight for equality. A fight for what's right. I hope the family that is suing that company, every dime that they are worth. It makes me sick that I just found this out. And I spent years not saying this stuff about this whole racism crap, but that was the last straw. The fact that that company is willing to appease the masses based on the fact that these people who are complaining never experienced that life and are claiming it as racism, even though they didn't personally experience it. If that company wins that lawsuit, it sets a new precedent that anybody can call racism on just about anything and get away with it. Even if it's not true racism. I hope the family wins. Because that company disrespected that family. That company not only disrespected that family, but that company also disrespected the lady that actually made their company their company. It's the most heinous act anybody can do. Because they weren't there in that life of what that lady had to go through to be able to have her face on that bottle. That was hard work. That was hard work and a status icon, a symbol of fighting in a world that didn't have equality at the time. That wasn't racism. That was a fight for what's right. And it sickens me that a company can go out of their way to disrespect somebody because they're trying to appease the masses, and these masses are mostly people who've never experienced what it was like to live in that age. It's disrespectful. It's unmoral, and it's morally unethical by all standards. Because there was no laws to prevent it. That was life back then. That was not racism like we see it today. That was life. And if you weren't there to experience it and be a part of it, it wasn't racism. And anybody that lived in that age wouldn't have considered it racism during that time. They probably do now with them being 60, 70, 80 years old or whatnot. But back then, they would have never thought it was racism because that was life. If you weren't born in that age and you weren't born to witness and feel what it was like, then you have no right to call racism. Because I promise you, they fought to give you what you have today. Both white and blacks. And it sickens me that a company can stoop that unmorally based on the fact that most, like 99% of the people griping, it's people who's never experienced that life in a world that those laws just didn't exist back then. It's sad that this is the world we have. We are essentially digressing. We're not progressing, we are digressing because of crap like this. We will never be able to progress, to be a better country and a better world if this crap is allowed to happen. If this crap where a company is allowed to strip their most iconic figure based on a photo that happened in an age where there was literally nothing anybody could do at the time. If that is allowed to happen, the world is a lot more doomed than I thought it was. And I have a lot of hope for the world and its people. But I don't know anymore. This makes me question the sanity of humanity. It really does. And it makes, and honestly, it makes you think, like, the fact that that woman had to fight so hard to have her face on a bottle in a world where there was no equality like there is today says a lot. There are multiple different TV shows and movie references where blacks and whites were treated equally on set as actors and actresses. I mean, this was before all those rules and regulations about racism were even included into today's society. They literally fought to give you the rules and regulations you have now. And by bringing up old issues and claiming racism on their behalf, you are basically destroying everything they fought to give you. You're basically, saying, you're slapping them in the face and saying, so what? now we're fighting for you, which basically makes their entire fight for forgive you what you have null and void. Because you're basically saying, well, I don't like how you did it, so we're going to do it this way. You're being a child and whining about something that didn't even concern you, and you weren't even born to witness. You're basically throwing what they gave you in their face. Just like the lady on the pancake syrup bottle. The company is basically throwing that woman's face and all she accomplished in her face and her family's face. Because of the simple fact that today's time, the people who are complaining never even lived during that time when there was no rules or regulations to claim racism like there is today. We have it better, people. Start progressing society, not digressing about something that happened in the past that there was no laws to prevent. You can't change the past, so stop bloody trying. Think about the future. That's all I got to say. I'm signing out. Future, move forward now.